you have the quote, better men, better hitters. Talk a little bit about where this quote comes from and what it means to you.
Yeah, I think when I was coaching in college, we would always say better men, better baseball players. And I think, and it still applies to, all baseball players, but obviously now, being in just strictly the hitting space, there's so many difficulties that come with hitting. You get outside out of 10 and you're really good. There's just a lot of mental struggle, a lot of things outside of your control as a hitter. And so the better, more mature we can be as a hitter, the more, that we have just priorities in line, whether that's ball versus life or, hitting versus defense, or even just, if I get a hit a game for my entire life, I'm a pretty decent hitter. There's just so many things to work through. And so mostly just a reference to the more we can grow up and mature a player as a human being, the better off they're going to be, whatever they're doing, whether it's hitting, defense, baseball, life, parenting, whatever.
Since your last appearance, Be the Best, you were at the Air Force Academy, and you've had 2 positions since now in the pro ranks. How has your transition been like so far, and how have you been able to adapt in a different role now?
The 2 games are very different, pro and college, but it's the same game, 60 feet, 90 feet bases. We're dealing with the same issues with hitters, guys that, want to perform, want to produce. The pro game, the biggest thing about the pro game is the timeline. You've got a longer time with these guys, although sometimes it doesn't feel like, the development looks a little bit different in that fashion, just because, you can take it at a more bite-sized pace. I would say, from a personal development standpoint, I've just gone straight down the rabbit hole hitting. As a college coach, you're recruiting and you've got practice and you might be teaching classes. You've got all kinds of things that aren't the baseball game. And, even within baseball, if you're a hitting coach, I was coaching the catchers too, and doing the base running. And so it's been fun to just really drill down on specifically the hitting piece. And I was with the Reds for the last 2 years and now with the Mariners. And it's been as good as it could be this past year. Enjoyed it. My type of people over here, and it's just been a lot of fun.
In your coaching career so far, what lessons have you learned that kind of taught you the most, whether it was through failure, adversity, a mistake, shaped you into the success that you've been having the past few years?
Good question. From a failure standpoint, probably just, I say this all the time, just the failure as a player. The fact that I didn't make it to the big leagues gave me a lot of material to start looking towards as a coach. A lot of how come I wasn't good enough to hit in the big leagues or to play in the big leagues? And with that comes a ton of questions, and I think that would probably be the biggest driving factor. It's not even a chip on the shoulder thing. It's more just a, man, if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now, could, be, and then that's all I'm doing every day is trying to impart those lessons onto players so that my problems be something they learn from without having to experience. I would say that's probably the biggest one, because whoever you are, you've got failures, you've got a book full of failures, and it's just what we take from them and what we do because of that means anything. The failure doesn't really mean anything, and it can be useful if we turn it into something good.
Who is one person, either in your profession or entirely outside baseball, that you truly admire or you look up to and you try to that challenge you to continue to raise your standards?
Yeah. In life really just intermix for me constantly. I think that's the best way to do it. I enjoy both of them. It's the balance of the two that makes it, fun. And so the 2 biggest influences in my life, that they're, life influences as well as baseball influences. My father, first off, he was my coach all the way. Coached me in high school, obviously coached me as a kid. Everything that I had from a foundational standpoint came from what I learned from him. And it was mostly just the ability to just work. Just like when you're not happy with something, just figure out, one, how to get going and to pull on that thread, and then just don't, that's probably, if my dad's got any trait in him, there's just no cool. Another one that started professionally and now is just grown into a friendship is my former boss, Mike Kozlowski, at the Air Force Academy. When I first got there, it was like, man, how can we be better at baseball? And I've probably learned more and become a better baseball coach from those types of lessons, right? Better men, better baseball players. I would say, a large chunk of that has come from Coach Kaz at the Air Force Academy, just in line to, if you've got everything lined up, it becomes a lot easier. Or if you've got a bigger why really outside of baseball. And at the Air Force Academy, that was turning boys into men and men into war fighters. And now in professional baseball, it's 16, 17, 18-year-old kids into hopefully big leaguers, and giving them the tools to survive on their way up. And if it doesn't work out and they don't play in the big leagues, making sure that we were a part of creating those tools that allow them to be successful in life.
Now that we're switching to a new location, what is your suggestions or advice to people who are returning and also those that are new attendees from the Southeast, Mid-Atlantic region on what they could expect at Be the Best?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice would be to be there. Half the battle is showing up. I think that applies to pretty much anything. And, if you're trying to get something out of it baseball-wise and coaching-wise, I haven't seen the entire lineup, but I'm sure you guys have a great lineup. The intimate setting is it's my favorite part of Be the Best. It feels very much like a conversation as opposed to, standing at a podium and just preaching. And for me, that's the best way to learn. I think with whether it's coaching or presenting, you always want it to be a back and forth. And I think Be the Best allows for that, in the smaller sessions, the rap sessions, but also the hanging around in the hotel, the conversations that happen in between the presentations, dinner, drinks, lobby, whatever it might be. And that's something that I think Be the Best probably does a really, or does one of the better jobs at. And that's a big part of what I enjoy about this.